If you're new to machine embroidery and want to learn how to digitize anime eyes, this is the video for you. Watch until the end to learn the best tips and tricks. At the top center, here I have my backdrop, so click the load backdrop button. And here I have my masterclass anime eyes project 1 and I'm going to click open. Here we go. If you click on that backdrop again, you can now select that backdrop, and when I press M or up here, it says toggle metric to imperial. That would be at the top center. You will find the millimeters and inches. This image right now is 6.99 inches by 2.76 inches. I made this 5 by 7 because that's usually the size that I like to create these designs, even though this one is going to be a little shorter on the width. But 6.99 by 2.76 is perfect. Now, if you want to, you can bring down the opacity, and I'm going to do so a little bit in the properties. Once again, just so you can get access to the design or the image itself, go to backdrop, make sure select backdrop is enabled, select the image, and then under properties, here you can change the size, but we're going to leave it the same, and the opacity, we're going to bring it to around 50%, and that's good to go. If you haven't printed out your hotkey list, I urge you to do so, because this is something that we're going to utilize a lot in these lessons. We're going to use a lot of hotkeys to speed up our digitizing, make it really fast and fun, and you'll notice that you're going to not only get faster at digitizing, but you're also going to not feel as exhausted when it comes to creating designs. So if you haven't done so, make sure you print it out. I'm going to press 1 on my keyboard, and 1 is going to bring up the run tool on my widget tool. Now I'm going to leave everything the same, so we're not going to change any recipes or anything, and we're not going to change any settings right now. We're going to practice doing that probably at the end of this tutorial. I'm pressing and holding spacebar so I can pan around, and clicking and dragging with my mouse. So I click and drag with my mouse, and I press and hold so I can drag around, like so. And one of my goals is going to be to not zoom in too much. If you've already done John Deere's courses, then you know that he doesn't like you guys zooming in too much. So maximum 600%, but I'm still going to use the scroll wheel to go around 600 like so. Go in and go out. And that's because I'm using a mouse as opposed to a tablet. I love digitizing with a mouse. Okay, let's select the red color to make it look nicer and so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. And why don't we get started with this shape down here? That way I can explain a lot of those smaller details that we're going to do around the eyes, all of these areas right here. Now, with the run tool, pressing 1, make sure I have my run enabled. I'm going to get started at the bottom, and I'm going to left click, and I'm going to left click again, and then left click. So this right now has 1 pass. That means that I've gone from here to the end. Now I'm going to left click back on this point and left click back on this point. Now that has 2 passes, also called red work, which we're not officially doing here, but I still like to practice it every now and then. So we went this way and we've come back. Now I'm going to go this way, 1, and I'm going to return. And let's click on this one right here, and I'm going to go 1 and then return, 1 right here, return. Gonna go to the next one. As you can see, I'm not going right on top of the shape, and that's because we are so zoomed in at 600%. I'm almost trying to imagine shapes that are not going to overlap each other, but are still relative to that design. No one's really gonna know what the original image looks like, so I get to play around a little bit with my imagination. So let's press 1 and then return. And now all of these up here, all of these points have 2 passes. Let's finish up here, 1, 1, and now we return, so that's 2, 2, 2. And then where do we start? We started down here, so I'm going to press enter with my keyboard, and now all of this area right here has 2 passes. We're gonna try to do our best to do that with a lot of these little areas. Not always going to happen, especially if they're very tiny like over here, but I do try my best to follow the red work method for the tiny little details. Now I think we should get started with this part of the eye because it looks pretty awesome, and I think we've talked about it enough. Let's get started with digitizing. With the run stitch or number 1 on the keyboard, I'm going to press left click to put my first point down. Now, why did I put it in such a random spot? I put this run stitch right here because it is going to be underneath both the fill and the satin that we're going to create later on. So I'm basically using a subway system. I'm going to delete all of these because I don't need them, but all of these stitches that I'm creating right now will be hidden underneath the fill and the satin. Remember, you can use your runs as connections. So that is my goal. That is why I've created this run starting here, and now I can use it to travel around this area. Let's do 1 and return, go over here, 1 and return, and all I'm doing is left clicking 1 and return, 1 and return. If you want, you can right click in the middle to start curving that run stitch, 1 and return, but I'd rather just do 2. So 1 and return, and we're just gonna go around here, 1 and return, 1 and return, and all I'm doing is left clicking, going to 1 end and returning, 1 and return. Let's go this way. Let's do these over here, 1 and return, 1, return, and then here we can do a couple of these little ones, return, and 1 and return. Okay, if you want me to show you really zoomed in, it looks something like this. And again, we're 3,700% in. Definitely don't suggest you being this zoomed in at all. But as you can see, I put my first point here. Okay, I'm going to do this one and I'm going to exaggerate it because we're so zoomed in. 1, okay, and now return. But as soon as we zoom out to 600%, which is the maximum you want to be in, that's how tiny you're creating that point right now. So putting my next point in, 1, return. Let's keep going, 1 and return. And as you can see, I'm going in the center of this satin outline that I have already mapped out in my mind. I'm going to create satin stitches all the way around this area. So all of these points that I'm creating are going to be hidden underneath. 1 and return, 1 and return. Let's keep going, 1 and return. And I have not pressed enter. I have no need to press enter at all because this can all be one shape. So 1 and return. Let's just go all the way around. Start adding those details right here. And the more you practice with your mouse or with your tablet, you'll notice that you're going to get really fast at creating these details. Now, all of the inside of those tiny little details are now done, and we have yet to press enter. So we can now finish off this area down here because there are a lot of tiny details in this area. So we might as well do them as well. I'm going to allow myself to travel back here, so I'm just pressing a point every now and then to make sure that I do my best to stick around to the middle of that satin outline that I'm going to create after. And here I'm going to do a 1 and return, and I'll tell you exactly why I'm doing a 1 and return on these areas in a second. Let's do 1, return, 1, return, and then 1 and return, and we can finish right here, and I have no need to do a return on that area. Look at that. That looks really weird. But I promise you, we're going to make it look a lot better after we add the satins and the fills, okay? Now, I am going to make sure I'm at 600. I don't want to be zoomed in too much. And now that we finished with the run tool, we can switch back to a different one, which is going to be a satin stitch. So I'm going to press 2 on my keyboard, and that will bring up the classic satin. If you don't know how the classic satin operates, it works in point counterpoint. So let's create this right here. I'm just going to go into a blank canvas. To create a point and a counterpoint, we're first going to do left click and then counterpoint, or the other end of the shape, counterpoint, the other edge of the shape, and I'm going to right click to create a curve. So I'm doing curve, curve, or right click, right click, right click, right click, right click, right click. If I want to do a straight shape, then I'm going to do a left click. Now be careful because Some shapes will react a little bit weird. So again, it all comes back to practice, but I can keep right clicking all the way around. So point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, right click, right click, right click, right click, from one edge of where I want the shape to be created to the other edge of the shape, and left click and press enter. Now, this just did two things. It created a satin stitch, but it also created a shape that has the stitches flowing in different angles. So if I press W on my keyboard or up here, I can go to my inclination edit and I select here, you'll notice that each area of this shape has different inclinations. You can press on the minus or the plus, and let's see here, this is at 23 degrees, this is at 10 degrees, this is at 167 degrees, this is at 148 or 150, and this is at 51. I love using this tool because it allows me to set automatically the degrees by the way in which we create our point counterpoint. Let me delete this real quick. And I'm going to press 2 again. If I were to now do the same thing that I just did, but I started here, and as you can see, I'm doing point, counterpoint, but I'm almost doing it in a really odd way where all the point counterpoints are kind of going from the top to the bottom, like so. I'm still creating the shape, and I'm kind of stuck there because I can't really make it anymore, so I'd have to stop there. It's looking a lot different, and that's because with the point counterpoint we pretty much made point counterpoint point counterpoint point counterpoint. And let's do this now again, where I'm going horizontally, so I'm creating that inclination, then I'm creating a second one, I'm going now almost at a 45 degree, I'm going at a vertical, again a 45, 35, and now I'm going back to a 0, and you can see it looks really nice like that. So we're going to be practicing that tool as we go along with our digitizing. Let's go back to this area. Now let's press 2 on our keyboard to ensure that we have the classic satin enabled. And one of the most important things to look out for, and the reason why it's one of my favorite tools, is because we have the length meter on it. So here, when I press left click, I can see there's length 0 millimeters, but as I go further, there's 2.9, 35, 46. It's almost like a ruler that tells us the length between the point and the counterpoint. I love this so much because if you know, when it comes to embroidery, there are safe guidelines and it starts at 1 millimeter. You don't really want to be doing any designs under 1 millimeter length, and that is between the one stitch point to the next. So something like that. Anything below this, you can begin to have issues on your machine. So I always try to do at least 1 millimeter whenever I'm utilizing the classic satin tool. So we're going to press point right here where our last stitch was, and if you don't see your scissors, just ensure to go to the top left and make sure that view commands is enabled. That way you know where your design is done. For me, it's here, and I wanted to make sure that it finished here because I'm using that point to travel and to try and avoid trims and jumps and all of that. So let's left click by doing point. And again, I'm going to ensure that my length is at least 1.1 millimeters. Perfect. So 1 millimeter over 1 is good. Then we're going to go on down. Remember how we were utilizing the tool to create those different angles. So I'm going to go down this way, and I'm going to angle my next point. Now you see that we have length and width. The length is the length between this point right here and this one that we're going to create. And the width is the length between this point and this point that we're going to create. So to me, I see width 1.4. Perfect. I'm good to go. Let's create the next one. Perfect. And now width 2.3. It's above 1. I'm happy. Let's see the next one. Let's make it right here. And let's make sure it's at least, let's go back. So that would be 1.4, 1.7, perfect. Again, I'm always watching out for the width, 1.8. Let's go to the next one. I'm just left clicking. I don't even need to right click here because it's such a small design. 1.7, 1.7 width, perfect. And then 1.2 width. and then 1.5. I'm just practicing doing at least 1 millimeter width, so 1.5. Here, let's do 1.8, and let's go to the end by left clicking, and I'm just exaggerating a little bit, 1.9 width. That is perfect. I'm going to press enter on my keyboard. And you can see that we created this bottom area of the eyelash. It just looks so nice, and we can ensure that this is not going to be bulletproof or it's even going to hurt our design. Now you'll notice there are two scissors now. If you don't, that's awesome, because that means the software recognized that that's where the shape started and where it ended. But I have two scissors, and my goal with any design is always to avoid any trims. I don't like trimming. I like to ensure that the design can run its whole course and then only trim when necessary. So let's click up here where we can do a path edit. So we're going to do path edit, and we're going to select that shape that we just created, the classic satin. I can see that the start is over here. I don't really want it to be there, so I'm going to click and drag to this end. And now it's connected. It's done the closest join right here, which means that this whole design only has one trim, and that is down here. Perfect. Now let's switch back to 1 because I want to use my run tool again. And I remember that this shape or this area only has one pass, and I did want it to have two passes. So starting here in the center, this area is going to be hidden. I'm going to just return by left clicking and creating a couple points here. And now we are finishing over here, and this one has two passes. We've created this bottom area. It's perfect. Now, because we've already done a lot of the tiny details, all of these run stitches, I think the next step is to create that fill that goes here in the background. So for that, we're going to press 4 on our keyboard, or if you go to your widget tool, there's the fill tool. And I'm going to just no, let's keep it the same color. I was going to say let's make it a different one, but it's better if we just do it the way that it should be done, and for us to get really fast at digitizing. I'm going to ensure, and if you remember at the beginning of this video, I taught you that I want to overlap it a little bit. So I'm imagining where this edge of this satin would be. I'm going to overlap this by starting here, left click, and let's just go around here. I'm going to overlap this under the imaginary outline that I have here. Let's go around here and left click, and let's go around here to around the center. And now I can go all the way around this area because I know I'm going to make my inclination point, or my angle of this fill is going to be horizontal. So I just created the shape right here. I'm going to press enter, and that's my shape. And then it's going to ask me where I want to put my inclination. So I'm going to click and drag. Let's make this a 180 for horizontal, and press enter and enter. There you go. We have created the inside of the eye now. Again, we have two scissors, and that's because if I were to go to my sequence view, here I have my run stitch that finishes on this edge, but then I have my fill path and my fill. When I press Q, I can enable my path edit. I can see that it starts here. There are two ways in which you can fix this. Number one, bring your fill path start to around this area. That way it starts and it doesn't trim. Or you can grab your run stitch and just bring the stop over here, and that will delete the trim. And then if you want, you can right click, and I'm going to delete this point, and I'm going to delete that point, because now the run is connecting with the fill right on this edge. Perfect. There's only one scissor. Now that we've created the base or the fill, we can work on the inside of the eye. So again, I'm going to press 2 on my keyboard, and I'm going to go back to my classic satin. So let's close the sequence view, and over here on my view 3D, I'm just going to disable that so I can see a detailed version of what's going on. I'm going to left click, and you can see 3.6 millimeters in length, and I'm going to right click and right click and right click and right click because I want curves. I don't want straight points, so I want them to turn into curves. Right click, and now left click and left click. They were all between 3 and 6 millimeters in length, and I'm going to press enter. And you can see we've created that inside part of the eye that looks so, so cool. Now, remember how I told you that I wasn't really going to be doing the official red work? That's because we're going to do a little bit of a connection, okay? So I'm going to press 1 on my keyboard, and from this edge right here, I'm going to left click, and then I'm going to bring it to that end right there and press enter. What that did is it created a connection from the last shape that we created, so this oval or the inside of the eye, and I made a connection to the outside satin. That way there are no trims, because I really don't like trims, so I do my best to avoid them, and I prefer having this tiny little run stitch connection that I created between the inside and the outside shape to avoid trimming on your machine. That's going to save you so much time. All right, let's press 2 on our keyboard to bring back the classic satin. And we're going to do point, counterpoint, 2.4 millimeters, perfect. The length doesn't really matter, but the width does now. So 1.8, let's do, doesn't matter, 1.4, and let's do 1.1. Right click because I'm doing curves, right click, right click, right click. Let's go all the way around, right click, right click. And let's go all the way around. As you can see, that's what I'm talking about, overlapping. So if I return a little bit, I'm going to overlap, kind of put that fill in the middle of the satin stitch. And I'm almost imagining that angle creation with the satin. So let's go all the way around, right click, right click, right click, right click, and I feel so confident from how much I've practiced creating my satin stitches that I know that I'm at least doing 1 millimeter, that one being at 2.6 millimeters, and then I can press enter. And there we go. If we were to zoom out, it looks something like that, which in my opinion looks like an eye. It looks like it's going to pop out so much when we do the actual stitch out or the embroidery. So let's keep going, go back to 600%. And now that you got an explanation on why I create a certain shapes, let's put them all into practice and let's do the rest of the design. So I'm going to switch to 1. And here I have another thin shape. Usually for these, I like to do a point and return. If I can, I'll overlap them with a satin. Let's do a point right here and return. And I'm just left clicking very quickly, point and return. Some of these, I don't know if I'm going to use them as satins. So if I know that I won't use a satin, I'll just do a point and return. Let's, what are we going to do up here? We're probably going to create the eyebrow separately, so I'll know that I'll trim so I can finish this area over here. So let's do point. We're going to do 1, return, 1, return, 1, return, 1, return, and let's do all the way down here and return. And now we can return over here and keep going. You see, no need to trim at all. Go to that edge and return. We can do this one right here, return, do this over here, and now 2 points, 2 passes, and let's keep going down this way. Let's do this little thing right here and return, and now 1 and 2. Perfect. Where should I finish creating this design? You know what? Let's bring it all the way back here and return. Perfect. And press enter. Now that looks really weird, okay? I can admit it looks odd. It just looks like a bunch of random stuff. But once we start utilizing the combination of satins, fills, and, well, the run stitches, that's where you really get all those shapes together. So now I'm going to press 2 on my keyboard, and I'm going to start layering with my classic satin. So I'm going to press point, counterpoint at 1 millimeter, point, and counterpoint at 1 millimeter. And I can create that little shape right there. Still 1 scissor. I'm always ensuring that I'm not trimming anywhere. I can create this other shape right here, but I think I want to go to my eyelashes once again. So pressing 1 on my keyboard, I'm just going to press left click to continue connecting with that stitch that I just finished over here. And I'm going to go to this area. Remember, I'm creating connections, and I'm gonna switch to number 2, classic satin, point, counterpoint, 1 millimeter, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, and press enter. See? Now let's switch back to number 1 because I want to create this next eyelash. So let's start close to that end and then left click and left click to create that connection. Number 2 on your keyboard. That's why you want to use your keyboard, because you become a lot faster as opposed to having to come here, switch back, and switch back. So point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, at least at 1 millimeter, point and counterpoint, enter. Number 1 on my keyboard, run stitch. Creation of the connection from one end to the other. Now back to 2, run classic. Point, counterpoint, and counterpoint, and press enter. 1 connection, we're good to go. Always check for those connections to ensure that we're not randomly trimming here and there. Let's go to the next one, enter, and now switch back to classic satin. So point, counterpoint, and point, counterpoint. And I think I kind of want to add a little one right here, the same way which I did on this end. And because I'm going to bring this classic satin shape that I'm about to create all the way up here, close to this one, I don't really need to create a connection because the program will automatically detect these 2 connections that are close enough. So when I make it right here, there's only 1 trim. That's the smart join. I love that tool so much. So we pretty much did all the tiny details on this design. So let's start down here. Point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, and point, counterpoint. So I just did all of that with left clicking, but now I'm going to switch to right click, right click, right click, right click, because I want to start making those curves. Right click, whoop, and I went a little too curvy on that. Right click. I'm going to exaggerate this point right here. Right click, right click, right click, right click. Maybe left click at this point, left and 1.9, perfect, and I can press enter. There we go. And as I zoom out, that looks pretty nice. Started out looking really awkward because I was trying to make all those connections, but now it looks solid. Hey, just a quick reminder that this is only lesson 1 out of 4 in this Anime Eyes masterclass. To learn more, click the link in the description. Now back to the video. And we've created 2 separate shapes. This one right here at the bottom, which is the nose, that's only had 1 trim, and the second one, which is this whole eye shape, and it's only got 1 trim. Let's move up to the eyebrow, and again, I like to use the run tool to create my connections as well as those tiny details first. So I start here because I know I'm going to create a classic satin on top of this, so I'm just going to add these tiny little details. And the reason I go to these edges over here is because, and I'm just going to zoom in a lot so I can show you, you cannot create this. I mean, you could, but your machine is going to suffer. So you can't really create this with a point counterpoint or a classic satin. I would generally advise not to do that because, again, yeah, you could if you really want to, but your machine is going to suffer. So to create points or really thin outlines like that, I like to create a run stitch that goes to the end like so. That way I'm creating that little nice detailed edge. And then with my classic satin, I go back to 1 millimeter. I can even angle it if I really want to, and then start opening that shape up. But starting at 1 millimeter, you still get that really fine detail at the end, but you're not hurting your machine because that run stitch takes care of that. Okay. Let's go back to 600 so we don't get in trouble. And we're going to press 1. Let's start here because this is the tunnel. I'm creating all my connections down there. No one will really see these stitches because we're doing the classic satin on top. And I'm going to create that point and return. Not point counterpoint, just go to the edge and return. And I'll do the same thing with this one, even though it's a little thicker. Now here, this is very interesting because these are separated, okay? You can really create a zigzag if you really wanted to, where you just kind of go like this. Obviously a little bit nicer, but I prefer to do something else similar to what we did with the nose part. So I'm going to do my point and return. Let's keep going, point and return. And I'm going to keep these lines at the bottom clear. So all of these are separated and they're connecting from the top. So point and return. I'm going to skip a couple because I do want the stitches to look a little bit spaced out. So again, going back to my imagination, point and return, 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 return. Again, this is the beauty of red work, and then point. And because all of these bottom points right here have already 2 passes, all I have to do is return via the top right here. And now we're back to safety. And here I'll just do this tiny little detail right here. Perfect. And I can end it right there. So now that we've created all the details of the eyebrow, let's take care of the satin. So I'm going to press 2 with my classic satin, and I'm going to do my point, 1 millimeter, perfect, point, counterpoint, which I did my counterpoint, I just forgot to mention that, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, and I'm just imagining the way that I would want the shape to be created, and I almost want both edges to kind of go inward, so they're kind of like bending inside, and you'll see once you create it and with practice you'll get used to where the angles will be made. So here we go, point, counterpoint, and counterpoint, and press enter. See, something like that. Now we have the whole left eye done. We have 3 trims, 1, 2, and 3, and that looks awesome. So let's do the same thing with the other side. Let's go over here, make sure I'm at least at 600, and I'm gonna go a little faster because this lesson has been long enough, and I think you guys should practice on creating all of these little runs. So number 1 on my keyboard, that's step number 1. Let's start adding these details. Let's connect because this is going to be underneath, point and return, point and return, point and return, point and return, like so, point and return, and point and return, point and return. If I really wanted to, I could do this shape right now, but I think I'm going to save it for now. Point and return, and then point and return. And again, feel free to change it up. Feel free to imagine something else. Maybe you want these bottom parts of the eye to be zigzag looking. Maybe you just want it to be a full fill. That's the beauty when you start working with more creative artwork like this, is you really get to make your own rules and decide how you want this design to look. Maybe you just want this whole design to be fully flat. Completely respect that because that is someone's art style, and that's completely fine. So created that whole top side. This all has 2 passes, and we're going to keep connecting underneath. So let's keep making that 2 pass run detail. So we're going down here, 2 passes, go down here, 1, 2. And depending on whether you're using a mouse or a tablet, there is on the pen, you can either add the right click or you can utilize your mouse with a pen. I know John likes to digitize that way, so your pen or your finger doesn't get tired when you're clicking the right click to create those curves. So whatever you're most comfortable with, because I know it is a lot of clicking when it comes to creating these details. So I'm just going around. And I'm going to save this little circle right here because I've already learned from experience that I kind of want to save that for the future. So let's go back down this way. Let's create these little points down here like that. I kind of forgot to do this one, so I'm going to backspace to create this one right here on this end. And now we can do these right here. I'm going to exaggerate them a little bit because they are very tiny. And we're going to probably almost start here because that is so small. So switching back to number 2, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. This is how fast I would normally go when I'm creating this. Again, because I'm so used to doing my point counterpoints, it has been my favorite tool when it comes to digitizing is the classic Satin. So it's just about point, counterpoint, and a lot of practice, just playing around with those angles and everything. Now that one looks a little bit less, I guess you could say smooth as the one on the right, but I also really like the style. there's something about it where it almost looks like the eye is laying on top of it. So I really don't mind this. If you want to edit a lot of these shapes, you can always press Q on your keyboard, and then you can just start modifying these areas, make it look a little bit nicer. But I'm pretty happy with this. And remember, we're at 600%, so you're barely gonna notice all of these tiny changes. Now let's press 1 on my keyboard. Oh, I almost forgot. Look at that. We have 2 trims. So let's press Q on your keyboard once again, and let's change up that start and stop. So I want my start to go where those scissors were. And if you don't see your start and stop, again, go to your settings on the top left and ensure that view, entry, and exit is enabled. Let's keep going. I'm going to go here and then just do this shape right here and then return. I guess I could have done it earlier. That's okay. We're still connecting, so it doesn't matter. Let's go all the way around, and now I can create my fill. Perfect. So let's do fill. That is number 4 on my keyboard, and I'm going to overlap ever so slightly my fill because I want to make sure that there are no gaps between my satin stitches and the fill that we're creating right now. Imagination, like so. Perfect. And let's bring it to around here. Perfect. We're going to do a horizontal, maybe, yeah, that's fine. Start and stop. Perfect. Do we have any trims? Let's go back and ensure we have no trims. All right, we are safe. Let's go back to number 2, and I'm going to just disable my view 3D so that I can create this eye go from one end to the other. And you'll see, whoa, Ken, you're doing 11 millimeters width. What about the safe zones? Well, the program has automatic split stitches. So at 7 millimeters, the program is going to tell the satin stitches to split. That way you never really go over 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever it is that you set up your split stitches to be. So we are always safe. I love that we have those programs preset. That way we don't really have to worry. We can just focus on digitizing the best we can. And here we go. Pressing enter, point, counterpoint. That's looking pretty cool. All right. Are we going to do that little method we did before? I'm going to choose the closest point, and I think that's between here and here. So let me just add that one right there. Perfect. Let's see once we embroider this out if we're actually going to notice that. I'm very curious. And now let's press 2, point, counterpoint, and right click now. Oh, let's disable 3D. I just pressed escape so that I could exit the stitches that I was creating. Let's do number 2, point, counterpoint, right click, right click, right click, counterpoint, right click, right click. Just doing right click for both sides, both edges, point, counterpoint, and I'm not even really looking, but I already know that I'm at least doing 1 millimeter because I've been practicing nonstop. Let's see, what was that? That was still 1 millimeter. All right. If you've been following the rules of 1 millimeter and you embroider this and you realize that it comes out really well, give yourself a high five for practicing those really nice, rules of digitizing. That is looking really, really nice. And unlike the left eye, the right one doesn't really have any spacing. You can see there's a gap. So we're gonna have to trim. That's just what's gonna happen. We could make a connection right here, right? So that connects, but I really don't like that. I think for this design, I just prefer to do a trim and make sure that it just looks pretty. So let's take care of the eyebrow now, or the eyelash. This is the eyelash. The up one is the eyebrow, of course. Totally knew that. And we're gonna use our connections. So let's start somewhere here in the center by pressing number 1, run tool. And let's go 1, return. Let's go here, 1, return, and 1, and return. So that whole area now here on the end is done. Let's go over here, 1, return. Let's do the same thing here. Remember how we did it on the other one where we did 1, return, 1, return, 1, and return, 1, and return, and then 1, and return. If you really wanted to, and this was a much bigger design than a 5x7, You could turn all of those tiny details into classic satin or satin stitches, but because this is so small, it's going under 1 millimeter, that is why I'm choosing to use a run stitch. And you're still gonna get that really nice definition because we're doing a double run. So here we go, one return, we're done with that area. Perfect. Let's go over here, one and return. Let's go over here, one, return, and return, and one, and return. Perfect. Now let's take care of those details. I'm going to press enter right there. Number 2 on my keyboard, and point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, press enter because I'm just going to do those details for now. Point, counterpoint, and point, counterpoint. Just do those details for now. Again, these are so close that I can get away with just doing point, counterpoint without having to connect them with a run stitch. Point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, and point, counterpoint, like so. Press enter. Let's go to the next one. Switch back to my run stitch. So let's do the connection right there. Press enter. Point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, and point, counterpoint. Pressing enter. Let's go to the next one by doing a run stitch for a connection. Point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, and point, counterpoint. Do we have any details on the right or the left? I think we do. So let's go over here and maybe add just this one up here. So point, counterpoint, and point, counterpoint. Okay, and I think we're good to create the rest of the shape now. So let's go start from the bottom here. Point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. I'm going to overlap this a little bit. So point, counterpoint, and now we can start curving. So right click to create those curves, go all the way around, curving this shape right here. And right here, I did press left click so that I can create a straight point, and finish off point, counterpoint, like so. That looks pretty awesome. Now, the only change that I'm going to make is over here because I don't really like the way this was left angled. I mean, there really isn't anything wrong with it, but I think we can make it better. So I'm going to press W on my keyboard, and yeah, I can see that angle is a little too exaggerated. So, whoops, I made one by accident. Didn't mean to do that. Let's press Q on our keyboard, and let's just grab this end right here and exaggerate it even more. That's perfect. That actually looks really good. Much, much better. So let's finish off this design. We have to do the eyebrow, switch it back to 1, and remember, just start by creating your connections because this is the train. You are not going to see any of these connections down here, and I think we can get away with just doing a bunch of these. So point, return, point, return, point, return. I'm going to space the bit out a little bit to make it look nice. Point, return, and point and return. And this one, I'm going to connect it from the bottom. Let's do this one as well, like that. Perfect. Yep, that looks nice. All right, last thing to do is press number 2 on our keyboard, and we're going to do point. Whoa, 9.3 in length. That's okay. We got the split stitches, automatic splitting. Next one, so point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, and here, point, counterpoint, point, and counterpoint. And let's see how that looks. I do like the way that looks. I think that looks pretty awesome. So now what else do we have to do is to ensure there are trims as well as checking some underlays. Let's check trims first. Remember, we have the first shape here, so that's 1 trim. Second shape here, 2 trims. Third shape here, 3 trims. Then this one right here is 1, so that's fine. Second one, that's fine, and 3. In terms of trims, we are okay. Now, when it comes to underlays, it will depend on the kind of fabric that you want to stitch this out on. The fill should already have some pretty good underlay. So if I were to click on the fills, or let's go to the sequence view and find the fills, I can see that's the satin path. So fill path right here. and let's see the properties. What is the underlay that we have? Lattice and contour. Perfect. So I'm going to grab both satin paths, and this is the inside of the eye. Let's go find the other one, which would be right here. I'm going to select both of them. And for the underlays, we're just going to, let's see, should we add a parallel? Maybe we should add a perpendicular. No, we're going to add a parallel. I think that will be pretty good. And for the rest, so now we can select this one right here. So we're going to choose the satin path. And this is going to be, let me just zoom out so you guys can see. That is going to be the eyebrow, as well as starting from the bottom. Let's go and select, that's too small. I don't want to select that. I think that's fine with the contour. That's the fill. That's the satin, which we've already said. Let's change this one right here. So that is the outer ring that we created, as well as the eyelash. So let's find the eyelash, and I'm only going to grab the big eyelash area, as you can see that I've just highlighted. Same thing with the other one. Let's grab this outside one. Oh, and the eyebrow. I almost forgot about the eyebrow. Where are you? You're right here. So outside ring, eyelash, big part of the eyelash, and eyebrow. Same thing on the other side, outside ring. We're going to grab the big part of the eyelash, which would be this one right here, and the eyebrow. Perfect. And I'm going to add a perpendicular to those as well. Whoops, I mean a parallel. That's just going to add a bit of a zigzag to give it a little bit more of that definition. But regardless, this design looks awesome. So let's ensure that it has a parallel. Yep, we're good to go. We can close that out. We can close that out, and let's move it over here. Let's hide the image now by clicking on the backdrop, view backdrop. That's what it looks like on the 2D view. Let's bring it to the 3D, and let's disable the commands. Let's do a really quick redraw of the design. Starting out with that. So again, very nice. It looks so weird when you just have the run stitches, but as soon as it starts adding the rest of the design, it looks very, very nice. So there we go. We have all of the black outlines. Did you think I was done? Because we're not done. We have one of the highlights to add, but I think that's the simplest part. Now that we've created a lot of those basic areas, we should be good to add those tiny little details at the end. So let's bring back the backdrop, click view backdrop, and we have this area, and this area. Let's start with the big one over here. And what are we gonna use? Well, we can use the classic satin. Let's switch back to classic satin by pressing 2, and I'm going to grab this white color. Now for this, I do want to disable, I guess it doesn't really have any underlay, so we'll leave it as that. And I'm going to do point, counterpoint, and then right click to make it a curve, and then point and counterpoint, and let's press enter. See how that looks. Ah, very nice. Okay, same thing. I'm going to make this circle bigger because I want to be able to connect this one and the star on the eyes. I want to almost avoid trimming and have them all in one go. So point, and I want to make sure it's at least one, counterpoint, and I'm almost imagining my own version of this design. 1 millimeter. That means I have to exaggerate this other one, 1.6. and 1 millimeter. Perfect. Now let's switch back by pressing number 1, and I'm going to connect it here. Let's do 1 and return, 1 and return, 1 and return, and then return right there. Okay. Now for this part, you can really get creative. You can make your own version of how you want to do the star. You can either do it all manually with run stitches, but I think I'm going to try my best to just use the satin. So let's go number 2, press the classic satin, and I'm going to do point, counterpoint at a crazy angle. When it comes to doing details like this, you really want to try to avoid going in the same direction. So you can see how these details are going in the same direction as the red color. I'm going to try my best to angle them in a way that way it will be on top of the stitches as opposed to blend into those stitches. So let's click point, counterpoint. Oh, one more thing. Just gonna view my commands again to ensure that I only got one trim, which is perfect. point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. Let's do point, counterpoint. And again, maybe I'm gonna have to come back and change the shape to something else, but I kind of want to try something like this, and that doesn't look the best, so let's play around with it. Let's change up some details here to make it look nicer. I'm just gonna go around, change some details here. Maybe I don't need some points, maybe I can modify a few. And again, I just press Q to edit these. I can press W now. I can probably delete these angles. So let's delete some of them by right clicking. Let's delete this one and let's keep it somewhere like this. Perfect. And again, trying to avoid keeping it at a horizontal angle. So let's just exaggerate a little bit more. Like so and like so. All right. That's what it looks like. Ooh, we have two trims. Aha, this is why I like to make sure that I have that on, so that way I can check what's going on here. I can tell that there's been some trimmery happening around here. So let me see this last shape. I'm going to press Q, start and stop, so that should be fine. But now when I click on this last shape that we created, start is here, start should start here, and it can end over here. That is perfect. And then this one, let's just bring it down even more so, exaggerate it even more. Perfect. That looks pretty good to me. I'm pretty happy with that. This is where the perfectionism kind of comes in. And because we're so zoomed in, we're trying our best to not overdo it with all those little stitches. Now let's do the last eye right here. And in reality, what we could do is we could just grab what we just created. So this shape right here, I'm going to right click while selecting the shape. So I've selected all of it. I'm going to right click over here and I'm going to press copy. So, oh, actually let's group them first. That way I don't move them by accident. Right click and duplicate. And now we have that second shape, which is red. So it tells us that we have that shape selected. Let's select those items. And then let's bring them over here to the other side. We can rotate them a little bit and let's make them even bigger so that it suits this other eye over here. And let's see what that looks like. Bring the 3D. Very nice. I like that a lot. We added 2 extra trims, but a different color. We added all those details that we wanted onto this eye. Now let's grab the red color on our sequence view and let's make it black. Let's minimize that as well. And there we go. We have that ready to go. Let's see. It's going to create the eye with the zigzags. Perfect. It's going to go all the way around, creating that zigzag where I wanted to add those underlays with the outlines. And here we go, adding all those details. I'm pretty happy with this design. Now we have one more thing to do, and that's to stitch this design out. I'm going to take it onto the embroidery machine, and I'll be back to show you the result. And here's the first design now stitched out. I am so happy with the way it came out, and I feel like this is one of those designs that you could put on any color background and it would just pop. Thanks to having the white on top of it, you could really have this be pink or blue or green, yellow, any color you want. Have this on a sweater and it's good to go. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Remember that the files are below this video, and I'll catch you on the next lesson. Bye bye guys.